Another episode of the Square and Compass podcast back in Mississauga. We featured this worshipful brother not that long ago. Actually, in our last posting, we had a short interview with him talking about our time at Southgate installation. But we're back with worshipful brother Raza Khan. Thank you so much for joining again.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
So before we start talking about kind of the broader topics, kind of where we see Freemasonry going and its future, especially from your perspective as kind of somebody who joined when they were younger and became a master when they were younger, relatively speaking. I just learned through the March 30th town hall that Grand Lodge put on regarding finances that there will be an in-person Grand Lodge this year. Voting, to my knowledge, will be still online, but there will be events, workshops, things of that nature from July 20th to 21st at the Royal York Hotel. So, first of all, as the Worshipful Master of not only a lodge, but a GTA lodge, what are your thoughts about the return of and I guess in-person Freemasonry in general, in-person meetings, but also, a return to an in-person Grand Lodge?
I think it's great. I think it's a tradition that goes back many, many years for us to meet together at the Royal York Hotel. And there is something to be said about that we've been doing it for a long time. There is obviously the balloting that takes place there, the important meetings, the Grand Lodge meeting itself that takes place there, annual meeting where everybody sort of marches in together, all the masters and Grand Lodge officers and etc. And at the same time, there's a social element to Grand Lodge, which we've been the Grand Lodge annual communications, which we've been missing quite a lot. And that is when the fellowship that takes place, the hospitality suites, people meeting each other that haven't seen each other in a long time. Our jurisdiction is very big, as you know. It's very, very big. I would say it's one of the biggest in the world in terms of geography, and we take it for granted. We take the spread, the what's the word I'm looking for here? The geographical spread, we take it for granted, right? And it's not easy administrating such a wide geography, right? Ask any Grand Lodge officer, senior Grand Lodge officer, like a Grand Master or a Grand Warden, how much they drive in a year, right? So what I'm trying to say is for us, like you live in Windsor, for example, I live in Mississauga. We would normally not see each other very often. I mean, maybe once in a while we'd meet up. I'd visit you, you'd visit me. But a Grand Lodge is a place where people that know each other a little bit, and they've had the pleasure of meeting each other, they reconnect. So there's that element which we've been missing. As a member of a Toronto district, Toronto West district. It's nice for us. It's very convenient for us. Grand Lodge the meeting takes place 20 minutes away from where I live, so it's very convenient in that regard that I can go. If I'm have work during the day, I can do that, and I can pop in right after. I can meet my friends for dinner. We usually do a dinner at we used to do it at this steakhouse with lunch every year at Grand Lodge. It was a tradition for many years, but we don't do it anymore there. Now we go somewhere else. So, I'm looking forward to that again.
You bring up a couple of good points in that answer. The first is regarding the geography. We probably are, in my head, I'm trying to think, maybe probably fifth or sixth largest jurisdiction geographically. I mean, Grand Lodge of Russia would be bigger. Alaska would be bigger, but we're up there. I mean, Ontario's up there, especially I think Europe. Like, people forget, you drive 10 hours in Ontario, you're still in Ontario. You drive 10 hours in Europe, you're in 7 different countries. So
I'm not I'm not sorry to cut you off. I'm not sure how that works and all these different jurisdictions work, especially Russia or Brazil is also a very big one. a very active one. India is also a very big one. I don't know how they work in terms of their provinces and whatnot, but I know ours is very, our jurisdiction is very hands-on in that regard. There's no metropolitan or district grand lodges like they have them in the US. Ours is literally a grand lodge, and then you have district deputy grand masters. So anyway, please continue, dude, the point that you were making.
No, no, it's a good point. I actually did an interview with district deputy or right worship brother from India. Throw that up on there. He was from the Southern District. He talked a little bit about how their Grand Lodge divides it up. But anyways, we are a very big geographic area. And that brings, in the idea of, well, two ideas, two issues. The first being, the continuation of online voting started last year in response to the pandemic. I mean, I took part and voted online, and I found it very easy. It was a good process. But what are your thoughts on, while maintaining an in-person committees, in-person events, allowing brethren to vote online beforehand, to take part in either DD votes or Grand Lodge votes online and not in person?
I think it's great. I think it's great because it provides a greater access to our democratic right to vote. Masonry, one of the most beautiful things about Masonry is our democracy and how we function as a democratic organization, to the very micro level where the Worshipful Master of the Lodge gets elected. Actually, I would say I would go even one step further. When the candidate gets balloted, even that is a very beautiful process, right? And then all the way up to the Grand Master getting the Deputy Grand Master or the Grand Master, Grand Lodge officers getting elected. So I think online voting provides a very nice. I think it's an improvement. It's an evolution of the older way that you had to go physically to Grand Lodge. If you're from if you're from a small town in Ontario that's far away from Toronto, you're driving 6 hours to cast your vote. How does that make sense? I mean, that doesn't. To me, that I know it was a necessity in the past, but it didn't make any sense as much as online voting. So now, someone that lives in North Bay or Thunder Bay, for example, Thunder Bay is quite far away from Toronto, right? But it is a part of our jurisdiction. Now they can easily cast their ballot online from the comfort of their home, and they can take a greater part in their democratic right as a Mason, of a member of Grand Lodge, for example. But But in the past that wasn't the case. So I think that's one thing. The other thing is that it removes the element of what I'm trying to say. I don't want to talk too much about it, but it removes the element of political engineering or political encouragement, or what I'm trying to say. When somebody at Grand Lodge, for example, or any other location, even though we're not allowed to obviously promote candidates, that's strictly forbidden, or endorse candidates, it's not allowed either. But at the same time, when people talk to each other, they decide, and this is not something new. This has happened for thousands of years, where people have come to agreements about who they want who should be leading them, for example. So I think that is something also that this online voting may reduce, because people can now vote from the comfort of their homes online, and they don't necessarily need to be at a Grand Lodge and ask and talk to people and hey, who's the popular candidate this time. That will probably be reduced, and people that's it. That's what I wanted to say.
I agree with you on both of those points. And we have talked, and to my understanding, this did take place in the past, though well before my time. I joined in 2007, and it's always been in the Royal York since I joined. But to my knowledge, and others have said that much earlier, Grand Lodge, the annual communication would move around, within the province and take place in different cities and different jurisdictions. I've always thought, I understand going back to Royal York, especially this year is the first year back, and it's shorter. It's only 2 days, not the full 5. But I've always thought, Grand Lodge may want to explore once again moving their Grand Lodge communications around and taking to some different locations. Especially as Ontario is really encouraging. The government is really encouraging people within the province to get out and explore more of the province and more of this beautiful province and the towns and cities in it. I'm sure some other towns and cities would appreciate 400 or 500 Masons descending upon them. Certainly the businesses would appreciate it, if nothing else. I know it might be a little bit further for you to travel, but for that's always been something I've thought about. I don't know if you have any thoughts on the idea of a roaming Grand Lodge or looking at different locations to hold it.
I think that's. I think I would need more data to provide an opinion on that, to be honest. But what do I mean by that? I mean, I don't know how many people come from out of town, and how many people they live closer to Toronto. That's what I would like to know, statistically speaking. Because I know most of the Canadian population, almost 90% of Canadians live within 100 miles of the US border. Okay. Now, in Ontario, that logically speaking, that would mean that people usually live within 100 miles or 160 kilometers of the Ontario and US border. So by that theory, Toronto would probably not be too far for most people. But I don't know. But however, I do think it wouldn't be a bad idea to kind of move around. Maybe 1 year in Hamilton, 1 year in Toronto, 1 year in another, maybe Windsor, for example, which is another great. Your temple looks like it can even hold that many people, and it can hold because it's so big, right? And the other thing is we spent a lot of money at Royal York, and it is a nice hotel. Don't get me wrong, it's nice. But one thing I know for sure is that the businesses around the Royal York don't appreciate the influx of people, right? They don't even notice it probably because Toronto people flying in and out all the time. And I know for a fact that the customer service, for example, from some of these supporting businesses have really gone down over the years. For example, we used to go to a steakhouse called Barty's Steak. I believe that was the name, Barty's Steakhouse, for lunch or dinner quite often. And that was a tradition that all of us would meet there from our lodge and some other lodges around us. And their customer service just completely went down, and food was not that great, the service was not that great. They just weren't happy to have us anymore. So then we moved around. I think the last time we went to the Jack Astor's across the street, and even then it was just so rushed. There was no space. It just doesn't feel welcoming, when you're crammed. So I think it's not a bad idea. I wouldn't be opposed to it if we wanted to move around. I think why not? Sometimes change is good.
Sometimes change is good. One thing that is experiencing a lot of change, some of it intentional, some of it, response to the pandemic and just response to changing demographics and a changing world, is Freemasonry. We talked more about this offline, both when I had the pleasure of visiting Mississauga Masonic Temple and just now before we started recording. What are your we'll start at the basics, right at the beginning, right? You joined relatively young, and your journey to the East, you said it took about 8 years, which is actually, I think, in my experience, and I don't know if you've had the similar experience or with other Masons with their journeys. In my experience, 8 years is not a long time historically speaking, but it is, relatively long for modern Freemasonry. A lot of Masons, especially in lodges where they need the help, are moving through chairs really quick. They're jumping chairs. Maybe they'll only do one deacon, one steward.
Mhm.
What was your experience like joining at a relatively young age and going through the chairs and kind of preparing yourself to become the worshipful master of Mississauga Lodge?
So that's a good question. First and foremost, I am extremely grateful and extremely lucky that I found Freemasonry, or Freemasonry found me at a very young age. Okay. As a matter of fact, I was 20 years old, and I was hanging out with someone, and I met somebody basically who was a Mason from Montreal. Okay, a mutual friend. I didn't know any Masons in Toronto or Ontario, none of that. I used to belong to a college fraternity before, a Greek organization. So I was used to a little bit of the camaraderie and the brotherhood aspect and the fellowship, even though the fellowship was quite different in a college fraternity, I'll tell you that. Um, so I was used to that, and anyway, I met somebody that they referred me, and by the time I joined, I had turned 21. I was 21 for like 5 or 6 months, and it's a very early time to become a Mason, at literally the minimum age. And it was a great experience for me at the time because it allowed me to mature at a very fast rate, because all of a sudden I was spending a lot of my time with men, and a lot of older men, middle aged and older men, right? So that fast tracked my growth and my maturity right away. In terms of taking the chairs, it's something that I was drawn to right away. Not the chair, but just getting involved. So the first thing I started doing was ritual work, and I did. As a matter of fact, I was an entered apprentice, and I was doing degree work for entered apprentice degrees. I did a very small part in the degrees that we had coming up before being passed to the second degree. So I was also lucky that the master the master at the time encouraged me to take on more more work. They nudged me and they said, why don't you do this or why don't you do that since you're interested? So I started getting involved. And I think that's very important. And then I try to do that now as a master of my lodge. I make a point and I remember to do that to other guys that are joining my lodge. Basically, I try to give them a little pieces of work and encourage them to take on responsibility, et cetera, et cetera. Now, yeah, to answer your question, it does take, on average, they say it should take about 7 years to head to the east, right? When I joined, I did all my 3 degrees within 3 or 4 months. After that, I just started doing ritual work. I took on a lot of pieces, actually. My first focus was taking on work. So right off the bat, I took on some of the biggest lectures that most people don't do, even at a later stage. All two of the working tools lectures I took on within the first year. Took on the charity lecture in the first degree, the floor work in the third degree, for example, the final charge in the second degree. These are all big pieces, but I just wanted to take on more, and so I did. And I didn't necessarily have to be in the chair because I didn't care that much, to be honest. Because I sincerely do believe that, uh, and that is my opinion to this date, that it is the chair. It's not the chair that makes the man; it's the man that makes a chair, so to speak. So responsibility is often thrust upon men. Those that seek responsibility or seek chairs, seek glory in a chair, will often be disappointed because they may get it, but they may not necessarily get what they wanted out of it. But a lot of people that are responsible, or they're good, they have the good intentions and they're willing to work hard. Responsibility will often find them.
Sorry, you mentioned. I want you to expand a little bit on what you said. You people who find themselves in the chairs or who desire a chair, when they get it, they may find it's not what they necessarily wanted or got what they get out of it what they thought they would. To what extent is that the fault of the person seeking the chair? And to what extent is that the fault of a lodge, um, perhaps not properly preparing or explaining what a chair means? to, to the person seeking that chair or seeking that office?
I think it's not anybody's fault in particular, it's not the lodge's fault, and it's not the person's fault. Okay, it's human nature. It's human nature. We're drawn to shiny objects, right? I mean, you know what? This interview is. I'm stating some very controversial opinions, so I apologize. But please correct me. Stop me if I'm going too far. Uh, I think that, for example, it's not the person's fault because people are drawn to shiny objects. In an organization like Freemasonry, a lot of people are drawn to the brass, so to speak, the bling bling, so to speak, right? There are many examples of that. People want to be the master, or they want to be a Grand Lodge officer because they think it will give them some access to something, whether it's access to a higher level within Freemasonry, which doesn't exist because we're all on the level, right? Or it could be something to do with self gratification or self, empowerment, or just feeling good about yourself that I have achieved this level. But the true purpose for all these chairs is to serve, right? A master is a servant, in my opinion. A master is a servant of his lodge, and he's a shepherd of his brethren. And his responsibility is to guide the entire group together in the right direction instead of looking good in his chair and his jewel. Even though it does look good, by the way, it feels good too. The collar feels amazing, as you know, right? It's my first year being the master, and when I put on the collar, I know it feels amazing. It feels like I've put on a cape, Superman's cape, for example. However, what is the real purpose, right? Now, to answer your second question, I don't think it's necessarily the lodge's fault either. A lot of lodges are struggling in numbers today. They're willing to take anybody who's capable of taking a chair, and they encourage people to fill the gaps because a lot of people are lifting uh, the weight, beyond. A lot of people going above and beyond their call of duty. You'll find often that in every group there's a core group of two or three guys that are doing a lot of the work, right? It's the 80-20 principle, the Pareto principle, where 80% of the people are doing 20% of the people are doing 80% of the work. So it's not fair to them either that they're doing all this work, and it's nice if new blood or someone new comes along and they take the chairs, take some of that responsibility. So it's not the fault of the lodge. It's not necessarily the fault of the person either. It's just human nature, I think.
I've been thinking a lot about the Pareto principle. It's interesting you bring that up. It's, because that seems to be there seems to be two schools of thought in relationship to membership and Masonic numbers, just the raw numbers. And although a lot of them won't explain it in this way, I think one school of thought seems to be focused on getting numbers as high as possible. And I think that really, even though they may not even be aware of the principle, I think really they're making an argument from the Pareto principle standpoint, in that, in their opinion, the 80-20 rule, or in my experience, even is sometimes more like 90-10, that rule is pretty much set in stone. So, in their mind, if you want 100 active Masons, the solution is to get 1,000 members in the lodge. And then out of that 1,000, 100 by default will become active, and the other 900 will basically just be a source of funding. They'll pay their dues, they'll come out twice a year, maybe, but the 100 will be active and kind of carry the Masonic torch forward. Whereas others seem to be arguing that it's possible to kind of get around that you don't necessarily need, if you motivate your membership sufficiently, you can get, it can switch from 90-10 to 50-50. You can get more members involved without needing to increase your membership necessarily. And I'm not sure, I don't know where I fall on it, because this is a debate even amongst our own lodges here in Windsor and at the Grand Lodge level. Do you just try to get as many people as possible in the hopes that 10% of them will become dedicated and active? And no matter what you do, that's just, you're kind of stuck with that principle, and that's always going to confine you. So it's just get as many as you can and rely on the principle that out of that group, 10% will become active? Or do you do the opposite route and maybe try to select for quality as much as you can, and you can play with those ratios and maybe get, maybe the Pareto principle doesn't have to take over and more can become active? I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I mean, it's because I was just thinking about the Pareto principle before we started this interview. So it's interesting you bring it up.
Appropriate. I have a very clear opinion on this. Okay. My opinion is that, first and foremost, the responsibility of us, each individual person, as Masons, myself, you, I'm the master right now, but even if I weren't the master, if I were just a regular member, and all of us share one responsibility, and that is to protect the West Gate, first and foremost. Okay. Protect the West Gate, protect our lodges from any unworthy characters. Only admit the best of the best, first of all. And I know it's easier said than done, because a lodge in a small town, for example, may not have the luxury of filtering out candidates and admitting only the best ones. So I sympathize. Okay. However, our responsibility, in my opinion, is to protect the West Gate, only let in the best ones, qualify the people, and groom them even before they join. So my opinion is that it's numbers can be played around. Pareto principle was it's a theory, but it's not set in stone that it has to be 90%, 90-10, or 80-20. It could be 70-30. It could be 60-40. I mean, there's no set in stone. I know in theory it is set in stone, but it doesn't have to be set in stone in our application. So what I think should be done, and what can be done, is first of all, for every lodge should introduce a program, some sort of mentorship program that basically focuses on the intake of candidates. And it shouldn't be specifically delegated to a couple of past masters that do the interview. It shouldn't be. I'm saying you should go one step ahead, one step above that, the interview or the investigation committee, for example. You definitely need a good investigation committee that interviews a candidate at their home. Okay, so you can see their family, you can meet their family, you can see how they live, you can see how they treat their family, how they treat their home. And that should tell you a lot about what kind of person they will be, what kind of member they'll be in the lodge, first of all. Second of all, this mentorship program is very important, in my opinion, that basically encourages to get to know the people, get to know the candidates, and teach them a little bit about Masonry without revealing any of the secrets. Teach them the public principles, for example, that we uphold, or charity, for example. Talk about philosophical ideas or anything, right? We're very lucky. We have implemented this in the last couple of years, our lodge. In my year, what I did is, when I became the master, I basically strengthened this committee very specifically. I asked a brother to take on this responsibility, and basically we created an Excel sheet of all the people that had come into our database as interested candidates. Okay. And I gave this person very specific instructions. We discussed some of the materials that we can discuss with them. And these are materials that were sanctioned by Grand Lodge at some point to talk about with the candidate. Okay. Share with the candidate. So we created it. We made a point to share certain things, to regularly keep in touch with our candidates through Zoom meetings or one-on-one meetings, and most importantly, assign them a mentor from within the lodge, and keep switching those mentors. So we did a little too much, maybe overkill, I would say, but it was good. It was a great experience because it led to us. We noticed a trend. The trend was some of the candidates kind of disappeared. They just fell off the map. And some of them got even more interested, and they got even more engaged with the lodge. And at this point, because of COVID, we were shut down for 2 months. As you know, we opened in March. We just did in my lodge, Mississauga Lodge, we just did 3 degrees in the month of March. And I can guarantee you that if you look at these three candidates, they're some of the finest people you'll meet. And you can tell right away by talking with them, their demeanor, that they'll be great candidate. They'll be great members of the lodge. They'll be contributing members of the lodge, because the first question they ask is, hey, how can I help? What can I do? Do you need my help in the kitchen, for example? Do you need my help to do any of this degree work, for example? So anyway, that's one of the trends that we're noticing, and I would highly encourage lodges to look into that, and just focus on enhancing that the ratio. So instead of letting in more guys that will be mediocre members, I think we should focus on building better Masons, building future leaders for the lodge tomorrow from the beginning, from even before they become Masons.
Is that like, where do you see, either presently or in future, where do you see the biggest obstacles for Freemasonry to overcome? Is it in membership? Is it financial? What do you think is the biggest challenge, biggest obstacle that either Freemasonry is dealing with now, or that Freemasonry will have to deal with in the coming years?
I think it's very clear, in my opinion. Two things. First of all, I think we are top heavy. Okay. We need to reorganize ourselves and adapt to the times. Okay. What do I mean by that? I mean, we own these gorgeous, magnificent buildings, temples, but yet a lot of us cannot afford these temples. A lot of lodges cannot afford these temples, the way we're organized. Okay. That has to change. I think a lot of lodges there are too many lodges. In my opinion, I think we have too many lodges in our jurisdiction, and I think we need to we need to shuffle around, and we need to amalgamate as much as possible. Either we need to amalgamate as much as possible, and it's going to sound terrible, but lodges that cannot sustain themselves should go dark, and their members should join other lodges, in my opinion, because our structure, our skeleton, our foundation is still based. Our structure is still based, but exists based on the days when Masonry was extremely vibrant in the 70s or 60s, where people were joining left, right, and center, and there were waiting lists for people to become officers, and that's not the case anymore. So I think we really need a reality check, which is happening. I think there's a natural evolution for most of these things, and they'll happen sooner rather than later, naturally, and they're happening. These discussions are being had at Grand Lodge as we speak. There are committees that Grand Lodge has created to address these issues. Same thing with lodges. A lot of lodges are amalgamating. I went to an amalgamation ceremony right before COVID, where 3 lodges came together in our district to form one lodge. But even that's not enough, in my opinion, because they could do more. I mean, more lodges need to do that, in my opinion. First of all. Second, that's one thing. The second thing, sorry, I know you were going to say something. I'll just complete my thought. The second thing is, I think we need to adapt to the internet age, the 21st century. We need to have good websites we need to have strong digital presences. We need to, I'm not talking about social media, because I don't think there is Masons, in my opinion, Masonry doesn't have much of a business being social, in my opinion, because we're not a social organization by any means. We can't share much, but it's important to have a good website. It's extremely important to have a good website, and it's important to have a good community presence in your community, whether that's the Christmas parade, whether it's your Remembrance Day ceremony, where your local lodge is going to the cenotaph and laying a wreath, okay? Whether it's the Shriners that are doing their parades. There has to be a public presence, I think, and there has to be a very, very strong website, digital presence that allows people to search. If someone saw something about Masonry and they search it up on Google, your website should have a good presence, and it should have a good organic ranking on Google, so it shows up and that people can get in touch with you, and that's how they can, and there should be enough relevant content on that website It shouldn't be just about where we meet, what do we do. No, it should be about who we are, what is Freemasonry, what does Freemasonry do for the organization, what are some of the charities that we support. There should be enough content about catered towards non-Masons. So when they look at it, they say, wow, this sounds great. I didn't know all this stuff. I should become a Mason. And there should be a call to action that allows people to get in touch with the website.
Why do you think we've seen, since you mentioned the 60s and 70s, you know, ironically, the 60s was when the major drop-off started. 1959, there's never been more Masons, at least recorded, in North America than there was in 1959. The big boom periods were the 20s and the 50s. Why is it you think that, and this isn't just a Masonic issue, but you know, I think it's affected us, if not the most, and then up near the top. Why do you think that men are not interested, or have shown less and less interest in joining groups like Freemasonry, just joining groups in general, but joining Freemasonry? And do you think that trend is an inevitability? Like there will be bumps and slight increases. People are saying now we're in kind of a mini Masonic boom period after the pandemic. People are showing more interest than usual in joining, but it's certainly nowhere near what it once was. Do you think that this, you know, is inevitable, that you're going to continue to see declining interest in joining groups of all sorts, including Freemasonry? Do you think society has just changed so much it's not set up to encourage joining like it once was? Or do you think that it's possible that trend can be reversed, and you know, how so?
I think it's a very complex question that you ask. I will try my best to answer that. And again, everything that I'm stating in this discussion is my opinion only. If it's factually incorrect, I apologize in advance. Okay. I think I think that Masonry is a very unique proposition. Brings a very unique proposition to the table for the human mind, for the average man, for example. First of all, we're only catered towards men. Half of the population right off the bat is eliminated. So you're only focusing on men between above the age of 21. Okay. I think.
Sorry to interrupt, but is that necessarily true? I mean, I've always kind of pushed back against that. Like, yes, Freemasonry is a fraternity. Like the term Mason is a fraternal term. So to join a lodge in Ontario, like under the Grand Lodge auspices, you have to be a man. But you know, certainly there's Rainbow Girls, there's Eastern Star, and then at the temple level itself, the building level, like the Windsor Masonic Temple, you know, we have a Scottish Rite Learning Center where the executive director is female. We have the ballroom. You know, sometimes I think, because that could be one, you know, for a lot of men may be interested in joining, but feel like they don't want to join because their wife won't be able to be involved at all, right? And it's like, no, there's ways that, you know, there's events, there's social functions, there's volunteering at the temple, like there's leadership positions at temples, there's Eastern Star, right? It is possible for women to be active and involved in the craft.
I agree. And as I mentioned to you at our last discussion or our last meeting, we actually have at our temple a group of lady Freemasons, female Freemasons meet at our temple. And they're an order basically recognized by the United Grand Lodge of England. They're one of the 3 lodges that meet in Canada, and one of them meets at our temple. They're called Lodge Keelgate. The official name is Women's Order of Freemasons. So we're used to the idea. I'm used to the idea, and I don't oppose it. However, I'm asking you a rhetorical question. Rhetorical question. What have we done to cater to the opposite sex? Not much, right? Have we really promoted the Rainbow Girls, or the Eastern Star? I don't think so. I don't know. Again, I don't know, but I haven't seen much. I think maybe we may have promoted them, but we promoted them through us. So we said, hey, I got a daughter. She should join the Eastern Star or the one of the groups, Job's daughter, I know, or Daughter of the Nile, I think one of them. So the point is, I think we've never really put Masonry as a women on the forefront of Masonic marketing or Masonic promotion, which is correct in my opinion, because Masonry is for men first and foremost. Now, continuing on to the question that you asked me, I think Masonry provides a very unique proposition for the average person, average man. First of all, our demographic is very limited. I think we peaked at a long time ago, like you said, 59 or 60. We peaked. That was a different reason, because it was after the war. A lot of people joined after the war, etc. But I think we initially failed to adapt to the technological era. Okay. We were very much an analog organization. I think even now we are very much an analog organization. You are, clearly not technologically challenged, and I'm not either, because you're already doing these podcasts and stuff. But how many Masons even know what a podcast is, right? Today, probably a minority, right? The younger minority knows what a podcast is, because we've downloaded them, we've listened to them, etc. But there's still a very big demographic within our group that is technologically challenged. First of all, we did not adapt fast enough to the 90s and the 2000s. Okay, internet. We did not adapt fast enough. We did now, but there are still many lodges that don't have websites. For Christ's sake, I mean, isn't that true? I know in small towns and there's even in cities sometimes there are lodges that don't have websites. I mean, I don't believe that. I do not believe that. I don't know how that's possible. It's crazy to me. That idea is crazy. Second of all, I think the human nature, again, the taste. The human taste evolves. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. Probably not the best example, but I think it makes sense. Subway, the sandwich shop, Subway at one point was one of the most booming restaurants that people could buy. It was one of the most booming franchise models. Okay, it was very popular. Do you remember in the 90s they used to have that guy Jared with the Subway ads, right? And he lost all his weight to eating Subway, whatever. So compared that to now, today Subway is declining at such a fast rate. They say that hundreds of Subway stores are closing every year in North America. Their sales are nowhere where they used to be. Is it because Subway is not good anymore? Is it because they're not good at making sandwiches anymore? No. It's because people don't like sandwiches as much as they used to. They're not as popular anymore. As a matter of fact, the booming restaurants, fast food restaurants today are all chicken related, fried chicken. Popeyes, KFC is very relevant again. Okay. Popeyes in the US, you have these restaurants like Chick-fil-A, for example, which we don't have here in Canada. And they're booming really fast. They have wait lists of people that are, interested in becoming franchisers. So the point I'm trying to make is that the human taste changes, the demand changes. And I think Masonry, for whatever reason, went through a period of decline for multiple reasons. One of them is because it wasn't a relevant offering to the society. Even though I think Masonry is the most relevant and it's the most important, and Masonry, we need more Masonry in our society. Not necessarily more Masons, but we need more Masonry in our society than ever. But I think today, because of the pandemic, because of I think our population is shifting again. There's a lot of younger people in the world. All of a sudden, I think most of the population is young in the world, right? Am I incorrect? I don't know specifically what the numbers are in North America. I know in Asia, for example, people under the 30 make up the majority now. I don't know. That's clearly not the case. I think boomers are still the biggest group in North America. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I don't have the stats, but we are an aging population at the moment in North America. Certainly in Canada.
Yeah.
Other places, it's the opposite. And that does present its own challenges. For not only for Freemasonry but just for society as a whole. Right, an aging population presents its own set of problems, especially in terms of who can do the work versus who's retired. If you have more of your population retired than working, that creates its own set of problems.
Sure.
Can you define relevancy? Because I think if I had to pick one word for what I'm trying to do with this podcast, it's to promote Freemason, to promote Freemason, to promote the relevancy of Freemasonry in our communities, whether somebody is a Mason or not, to promote its relevancy in their lives. How would you define the word relevancy?
I think this is a very tough question. I don't know what is the definition of relevancy. First of all, we have to address that. What is the Oxford definition? Let me just Google that right now, and I will try to try to link that within this context. So based on, I just searched it up, relevant, to be closely connected or appropriate to what is being done or considered. Okay, that's an adjective. Appropriate to the current time, period, circumstance of contemporary interest. That's a good definition, actually. So there you go. So I think Masonry, in terms of relevancy, I would say that today there is there's a search, there's an element in the human mind that calls for Masonry today. There is, Masonry allows people to make sense of whatever's happening in their world, in my opinion, through philosophy, through social intercourse, through the enhancing the faculties of the mind, etc. Masonry attempts to make sense, to either make sense of the world or to kind of bring its members to reality or to ground themselves in the truth. It allows us to escape our daily lives, use the lodge as a refuge, and have a moment of meditation, have an hour or 2 hours, through our degree work, for example, have an hour or two of listening to certain ideas that you would not normally be listening to outside the lodge, right? Can we agree to that?
I know I agree completely. Well, I guess I need to say I agree completely. I agree, but I think this goes to the idea behind this podcast and what some people are trying to do as well. I think there's an incompleteness there. My follow-up question then on this topic would be, do you think it's possible because your answer was about the ways in which Freemasonry is relevant to Freemasons. Do you think it's possible for Freemasonry to be relevant to people who are not Freemasons or who, maybe don't even have a familial connection to Freemasonry?
Yeah, I think so, 100%. Like I mentioned, us having a stronger community presence. Did you know? I mean, you and I clearly know because we're Masons. But did you know that Masons did so much charity work before you were a Mason? You probably didn't, right?
No, not. I mean, I was lucky. I did grow up in a Masonic household, so I had more of an idea. But even just with this podcast, the last 2 years, and since joining, it's amazing how much charity work is done that the communities are not aware it's Masonic charity.
100%. So that's the thing. I think we've done a poor job at PR. We've definitely done a very poor job on the PR front, and it's nobody's fault in particular. I think it's ingrained in our DNA because we are a society with secrets, not necessarily, obviously not a secret society, but a society with secrets. We did a very poor job when it comes to the PR side of it, and we didn't promote ourselves well enough. We didn't promote the relevancy to the average person well enough. and that in my opinion means, for example, charity work, right? The brotherhood aspect, that the fellowship aspect, and having friends. We can all agree this is a lonely world. It is the world is lonelier today than ever. That is, again, my opinion. This moment that we're living in right now in time, it is the loneliest moment in time, either in a very long time or ever. What do I mean by that? I mean, even though we're connected to the world, we have stronger devices in our hands that we use to send man to the moon. I mean, that was the case years ago. Now, this iPhone, I just got this like 2 days ago. It's probably more powerful than I don't know, the average computer 10 years ago, right? Um, Probably is, definitely is, I would say. So we got all this computing power in our pockets, but we're lonelier than ever. Our social etiquette has gone down. Our ability to have a not normal conversation in a group setting has gone down. And the pandemic has been a catalyst for that even more, right? The pandemic has made people lonelier. And we don't even know how that's going to affect the kids that are coming out of this pandemic, the lockdown, with the being schooled at home, homeschooled, for example. I don't know how that's going to affect them, because, playing with your friends, that was a big part in my childhood, and I'm sure it was for you. But for me, that was a big part, going outside, playing with your friends, or, meeting up with your friend, whatever. But kids today don't do that anymore. And we've got all these other things that are coming out now, the metaverse, that'll allow people to, again, I digress, but I think Masonry provides appeals to a part of the human mind that are part of the social life that most things do not appeal to, by providing an outlet, by providing friends. You become a Mason right off the bat. The whole lodge is your friends, is friendly with you, and you have brothers. And I think there's a lot that we can offer to the world, but we've just done a bad job at the PR element of it.
I agree. I agree with a lot of what you said. Absolutely.
If you disagree, tell me anyway.
It's not. Again, it goes to the idea of incomplete. I think the key idea of relevancy, and again, it goes back to, and I think this is where a lot of conversations end up going when you're talking about Freemasonry. Trying to use, because I love professional wrestling, I'll use professional wrestling as a good example, right? Because it's WrestleMania weekend, Dallas. Impact Wrestling is, which I've been involved with, is kicking ass right now as well. Professional wrestling is incredibly relevant to a lot of people who have no interest in themselves becoming professional wrestlers. Right? They'll buy tickets, they'll spend money to support the product of professional wrestling. And even, to use this as an example, they will watch content produced about professional wrestling, Cultaholic, whatever it might be. They'll watch podcasts and videos and interviews about professional wrestling, even though they may themselves have no interest in becoming a professional wrestler. But it's still something that's incredibly relevant to their lives. And and my opinion, I've talked about this before, the reason that they find it relevant is they're responding to something that professional wrestling shows in its presentation, and it's whatever it is. And that, I think, at its core, people will say it's the music, it's the lights, it's the, cartoon characters come to life, it's the stories, it's the athleticism. I've always thought that at its core, what people respond to when they're watching professional wrestling is the skill in which the athletes, engage in their craft. They're seeing, because I think human nature is where, and this probably goes back to an evolutionary sense, we're evolved to recognize and appreciate skill. which you had to do back in the Living Caves. You had to figure out who's the most skilled at things and put them in charge of that thing. And I think, and as a result of that, even if they don't ever want to become professional wrestlers themselves, they find it relevant to themselves in their lives and they support it however they can. I think the biggest challenge with Freemasonry, I mean, and this is something you know, right? To be a good Freemason is a skill. To be a good worshipful master is a skill. I mean, to my mind, being a worshipful master is, and being good at it, takes an equivalent amount of skill as, you know, being a world champion in a professional wrestling company. It takes hours of practice, hours of dedication, you know, sleepless nights, travel, all of those things, right? Sacrifice, hard work to have the skills necessary. And I think the one area of PR that Freemasonry really has fallen down on is we have this idea of saying, you know, you should, you know, here's the benefits of joining the crowd, you know, friends, chance to reflect, chance to meet new people. I think the first step of PR needs to be, you know, Freemasons are is a highly skilled endeavor. It takes work, it takes effort. And if you see somebody and they tell you they're the worshipful master of Windsor Lodge, Mississauga Lodge, whatever lodge it is, you can know and understand that that is a designation of skill and ability. Or anything else. And if you get that, people will start to...
That's a very good point.
They will find Freemasonry relevant in their life. Even if they don't themselves want to be a Mason, they'll recognize the Masonic Temple as a place of skill. And that they'll be more interested in, for example, checking out a podcast like this, Roundtable, First Three Knocks, because these guys are talking, they're highly skilled individuals. That's of interest to me, you know? I think that's the key thing that's been missing is, you know, because in professional wrestling, you know, you get 100,000 people buy tickets to see a show, you know, wrestling show, WrestleMania. Of those, you know, maybe 5,000 join a professional wrestling school and try to become professional wrestlers. Of those, maybe 50, you know, there's so many and it's so hard, but maybe 50, you know, start to earn a living at it. Maybe one of them becomes the next The Rock or Stone Cold, you know, or Roman Reigns or Josh Alexander, use Impact, you know? So I guess it's a long way of saying, you know, I think the key for the PR isn't to start with the idea of what membership provides. It's instead to start with the idea of this, you know, the skill and ability inherent in being a good Freemason. And I think that will encourage people to look at the craft, not as a membership-based organization where it's relevant if I'm a member, but if I'm not a member, it's not relevant to me. But that's of interest and relevant to me just because they are skilled individuals pursuing a challenging task, if that makes any sense.
No, that does make sense. And that's a very interesting perspective, which I have never thought of before. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. And it kind of brings to my mind that, you know, people are drawn to sports for a specific reason. Even though they're not, I mean, there's a joke that comes to my mind. That's why I kind of laughed. I can't remember who the comedian was, but he says that, you know, you see the most obese and unhealthy guys in football jerseys in America. But the reason why they like football is because the reason why they wear the jerseys is because it makes them feel athletic without actually being athletic, even though they're far from it, right? But the point is that the point that I was trying to make is that people are drawn to sports for a reason. It's the competitive aspect. It's the putting on your best behavior, putting on your best performance aspect of it. And I think Masonry in many ways is similar. But not every Mason obviously joins for that reason, because clearly you see many people that just sit on the sidelines. They don't like to do degree work. They don't like to do ritual work. They get their Masonic fix by observing and listening and watching, right? Some people like the social aspect of it. Some people like having the friends to go to the pub with after, or some people like the family aspect where they bring their significant other or their kids to the Christmas party. Uh, some people like the ritual work. I'm one of the people that like the ritual work and I like the skill, uh, which is why I went down this road of taking the chairs and becoming the master. And after becoming the master, I have developed a new respect for the office of the Worshipful Master, for the chair of the Worshipful Master, the chair of King Solomon. Because before I used to think that it would be just skill. It's not just skill. It's skill, it's tact, it's ability to inspire, ability to unite, ability to lead. And all those things may not necessarily come to you before you become the master. They may come to you while you're the Worshipful Master, hopefully. But you're right. It's a very interesting topic, very interesting, perspective when it comes to relevancy.
What would you say? I just want to bring this up while it's still fresh. You mentioned, it's not just skill, it's tact. There's a lot of things that go into being a worshipful master. What are some of the things that surprised you most when you went in the chair? What are some things you perhaps weren't expecting about being a worshipful master? And would you have any? We got our installations coming next year. We might have a new master in the chair. What type of advice would you perhaps give to somebody looking at jumping to the east, or being voted into the east, I should say?
I think not really surprising, but it was expected of me that okay. First of all, the one thing that did surprise me, and I was told it would surprise me, is nothing gets done until you initiate the process. Okay, nothing moves an inch until you make it so. Nothing. First of all, there's a lot of technical stuff that goes on behind the scenes of a lodge that most members don't know is happening. Okay, there's a lot of procedural issues, a lot of procedural things that happen behind the scenes, right? Writing up the summons, dealing with the Grand Lodge, dealing with the district, for example. The returns that become due at some point, right? Dealing with Grand Lodge, if there's a loss, for example, there's somebody that passes away, someone that's newly initiated. I mean, there's so many things that happen back and forth, and the secretary is the hardest working person, in my opinion, in the lodge. And we don't appreciate our secretaries and treasurers enough. I must say that, by the way. So if you're watching, Brother Secretary, I admire you and respect you for a lot of work that you do, and for our lodge specifically. So that's the first thing. The second thing is time definitely flies faster than it does when you're not in the chair. You only got a limited amount of time. I was unlucky. I only got to sit for 1 month now. I got 2 months taken away from me basically because of COVID, because of the lockdown. And I was really looking forward to those 2 months, January and February, because I had a very ambitious trestle board. And, they say that the first half of your year is the most important. Well, that may not be true to every lodge. In our lodge, the first half, our installation happens in December. And December to December, basically. So January is technically the first month, or December is the first month after the installation of the Worshipful Master, but January is the first month where you're sitting in the East as the Master. So for us, we have up until June. Our lodge, we have until June. And then after the summer recess, when we come back, September, October, November, December, those months are pretty much spoken for in our lodge. Because we have our official visit in October, we have our election in November, and we have our installation in December. So the only month you really have is September, and during that time, even during those months, we have certain traditions in our lodge that we have certain things that we do that some lodges may not do. So that's the other thing, that time definitely flies when you are in the hot chair. The other thing that the advice that I would give to anybody that's a principal officer and they are going to be heading to the east at some point, I would say that empathy is the biggest and most important skill to have in a leadership position. Okay, in any leadership position, whether you're the master of your lodge, whether you're the president of your Rotary Club, or whether you are a supervisor or a manager of your team at work, empathy is the most important skill to have, because you will be dealing with different types of people from different backgrounds, especially in our craft, where you have people from the military, you have people from the police, you have people from civil servants, you have people from trades, you have people from all different walks of life, and they're all wired differently when it comes to working in teams, right? Does that make sense? Like, they're all wired differently when it comes to teamwork. Now you are in one room with them, and you have to get them to do what you want, and you want them to enhance the experience of everybody. So dealing with everybody differently, that is so different. Empathy is the most important skill, and being able to put yourself in the other person's shoes and get them to do what needs to be done, basically.
Empathy is definitely, something very lacking in today's world, and is definitely a very important skill. Do you think, I don't even know if this is a Masonic issue. I can't say I've ever heard him brought up, but the idea of empathy, in a leadership, there are a lot of people, men and women, but a lot of men online, things like that, who seem to really idolize some leaders who were famous for not having so much empathy. Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. It seems that there's a certain culture. It comes and goes, but a certain culture that is drawn to or attracted to the Steve Jobs approach, the Elon Musk approach. I'm trying to think of others where, you hear about mood swings and volatility and anger and yelling and screaming. But then people say, yeah, but from that came the iPhone. You show and that seems to be, I can't say, to what extent Masons themselves maybe idolize, or there are bases that idolize that leadership style or that leadership philosophy. But it does seem that there is a large subset of, especially I would say younger men, who idolize those individuals and that style of leadership. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think there's a place for in Freemasonry, because it's not a job, you're not working at Freemasonry the way you're working at Apple, for better or worse? Maybe I could change that one day, but what are your thoughts on that style and that approach to either leadership and especially leadership in a Masonic context?
I think you have to be an outlier. Those guys were outliers. Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, they were outliers because their genius superseded their empathy, right? Their ability to have great ideas and etc. The entire organization was built around those people, the cult of their personality, and people wanted to work with them because. But one thing I want to add is that those organizations had amazing cultures. So even if they may not have been the most empathetic leaders, they were still able to carve or forge a great culture within their organization. Like Tesla, for example, is known for its culture, excellent culture. I mean, same thing with Apple, incredible culture. I think as far as our Masonic lodges, I think there's no space, no room for that kind of leadership in our craft, because we are volunteering our time to meet with each other and to do things and discuss ideas, etc. We're not there to work. We're not there to collect a wage. We are there to collect a wage, but it's not in specie. It's not in dollars. Our wages are not paid in dollars. Masons' wages are paid in other ways, as you know. But for us, it's not. I think there's no space for that in our cultures, organizations. Those type of leaders don't make good leaders within Freemasonry. For us, for our groups, I think it's the empathetic leader, someone who's mindful of other people's feelings. They're mindful of the needs and wants of the brethren, and to remember that, like I said in the beginning of the conversation, that we're shepherds, we are servants. A Masonic leader is a servant within his craft, and that includes the most worshipful Grand Master of our jurisdiction. He is a servant of our craft, and you know what? He worked really hard during the pandemic. You saw the correspondence that was coming from Grand Lodge. They were on top of it. He had the hardest job, I would say. Writing emails all the time and by himself, and consulting with the province, and coordinating the details, and being responsible for however many Masons there are in Ontario. That was his responsibility. So had he taken the approach that I'm like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs, I don't care. He could have written one letter every 3 months and said, okay, whatever, banned. I'll let you guys know. Like, shut down. Lodge just shut down. I'll let you know when I'll let you know. But he didn't. He was constantly in contact with everybody, with the brethren, and tried his best to manage the situation.
And one thing I think that's important about the outlier point you made, which is a very valid point, right, is everybody thinks they're the outlier when you're probably not. Like,
agreed.
What's her name? I just read the book, and it was such a good book. Theranos, the
Elizabeth Holmes.
There we go. Yeah, right. She famously tried to model herself on Steve Jobs and Steve Jobs' style of management. But the problem is, right, her clearly her genius nowhere near what Steve Jobs was. Like, everybody imagines themselves as the outlier, but you're probably not. There's very few people who have the genius to outstrip the.
Agreed. There's a very fine line between pathological liar and genius, and they both come across. It's hard. Sometimes they seem very similar. But she was a pathological liar, actually. I heard about her a long time ago, and I was fascinated with the company and her idea, and like, seemed too good to be true almost, right? And it was too good to be true, that the entire scandal. So again, we're drawn. The thing is, we're drawn to these people. We're drawn to the type A personalities for whatever reason, and oftentimes they're too good to be true, like I said.
And you brought up way back at the start of this conversation. We talked about the Pareto principle, and that's not set in stone. That you can, by careful selection of membership, nudge those numbers. So it's not 90-10, it's 70-30, 60-40. That is one thing, maybe, that if there is some things to take from perhaps the Steve Jobs style of approach, a lot of people have said one of his best skills was he was a really good selector of talent. He was able to, and he probably had to be, because if you're as much of a jackass as supposedly he was at times, you better be able to pick the people who can stick it out. But they say he really, he did not seem the type of person who was chained to the Pareto principle. He seemed to think, if he can select the best talent, he will get everybody at Apple, or a lot of people at Apple, doing the work that needs to be done, and not have it concentrated to fewer and fewer people. So selecting of talent maybe is one of those key things that we can take from that.
Agreed. And Henry Ford had a similar quote where he said that I may not know everything, but I can guarantee you that I will find you the person that does in under 5 minutes. So obviously this is way before Google, where you could just Google something on your phone. But he was a strong opponent to the idea, to the notion of being a know-it-all, or having a lot of information on things that weren't relevant. He said he was a strong believer that you should just hire the right people for the right job. instead of learning everything yourself. And that's how, that's how they built this magnificent empire, the Ford Motor Company. They were able to he was able to focus on what he was good at, which was the management aspect, some engineering and management. And a lot of it, he just hired the right people to do the right job, basically.
That, I think that brings me to kind of the last topic I want to go into. It ties into what we're talking about. Is it possible to be a disruptor, and in the positive sense of the word, right? A disruptor, but in an empathetic manner, either at the lodge level or, moving up or moving down. Because I think of Jim Keller, who he's like an engineer. He worked at a lot of different stuff, computer engineer. He had a great quote or a great discussion about this. And in his case, it was more defending some of the harder aspects of the Steve Jobs, Elon Musk type. He talked about how in an organization, and I think this happened to Freemasonry in the 60s and 70s. At a certain point, when an organization starts, it's basically chaotic. It doesn't really have, it's at chaos at that point. It's just trying to get itself organized. But as time goes on, if it's able to last, it will develop patterns and it'll become incredibly efficient and incredibly ordered. But then once it gets to that point where it's ordered and efficient and it knows what works, it's very hard to get it to change because people like stability and routine. And, every now and then, if circumstances outside of the organization change, that organization needs to change too. And it can be very hard to get it to change with the times, as we saw in the 60s and 70s. Society changed, Freemasonry didn't. And, Jim Keller's point was you need like maybe somebody who's not very nice to come in and say, hey guys, yes, what you're doing feels good because it worked in the past and it's a routine you're comfortable with, but it's not working now. All of the things that worked for you in the 50s, for example, aren't working in the 60s, aren't working in the 70s. And, maybe that's when you have to throw some books at, or be a bit loud or be a bit disruptive to get people to get out of that routine, because eventually you keep doing the same thing over and over again and you're not adaptable and you're not able to accept disruption. I think Masonry is a prime example of that. It worked great in the 50s. It worked great in the 40s. Didn't work in the 60s and 70s, and they couldn't adapt and change quick enough, if at all, in that time period. Now they're adapting, but I think the adapting, came far too late.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So I guess, my question is, how do you be both empathetic but a disruptive force if you see in a lodge or at the Grand Lodge level, a lodge or a Grand Lodge stuck in a rut and not adapting to the changing circumstances? Can you do that in an empathetic way? How do you do both? Because disrupting can be kind of a mean thing sometimes if people are comfortable in there. People are comfortable doing what they're doing, but it's not working. How do you get them out of that rut?
I think, first of all, defining disruption. So for your viewers, I hope everybody understands the term disruption. Disruption in my world is actually a very good term. It's a positive term because I work in consulting and technology tech.
Sorry to interrupt. That's the key. I like what you said there. It's, I think Freemasons, when they hear the word disruption, are afraid of it, but yes. I think it's a very positive term.
It's a positive term, actually. Disruption is, and I will define it for your listeners, for your audience, just for a moment. Disruption means the ability to change something and simplify it and make it better. In our world, in my world, disruption means to simplify a process using today's methods and technology and making it better than it used to be. Okay. In its traditional sense, to disrupt is to disturb almost. I think that would be fair to say. Disruption refers to disturbing, disturbing the whether it's the harmony of the lodge or whether it's the anything. But disruption in today's sense means to enhance something, to make it better and make it easier to use, whatever. I'll give you some examples. In today's world, there are a lot of disruptive technologies. For example, Uber, fantastic example. Uber disrupted the cab industry, the taxi cab industry. The reason why it disrupted the taxi cab industry is because taxis were known for their unreliability. They were known for a lot of, good points and bad points. Some of the bad points regarding, the taxi technology, the taxi industry, was that they weren't as reliable. Sometimes they would, cheat the fare, and that's around the world. I'm not talking about Canada right now. I'm talking about, you can go to Turkey, Istanbul, you can go to Beijing. Same thing would happen, that you get ripped off by the taxi driver, right? Because of they would change the fare. They would take the longer road to get to where you got to go. They would change the payment all of a sudden. They would say, hey, I didn't mean 20 pesos, I meant $20, like, for example. So because of all those things, someone came up with the idea that we can use the GPS technology to connect taxi drivers, cab drivers, directly to riders. And they created Uber. And it was a genius idea because it completely killed all those problems that would happen with taxis. The fare was pre-decided before you ordered your cab, right? Based on the GPS, based on the distance, right? And the timing of the day. If it's a peak time, it's higher. So it basically leveled the playing field. And today, people are far more comfortable taking Uber than they ever were taking a taxi, especially women, by the way, especially women at night. They're far more comfortable because they know a lot about their Uber driver beforehand. Same thing happened with hotels. Airbnb is a great example, right? Another great example is Amazon. Amazon disrupted the shopping mall as we know it. Okay. Amazon, how many people now regularly use Amazon, right? A lot of people. I personally don't. I have my own reasons. I don't like Amazon. I strongly oppose them. I have my own reasons, which I don't want to get into. They're very predatorial, basically, in every society. And I'm a strong believer that we should support Canadian jobs. We should support Canadian brands, small businesses, which is why I don't personally support Amazon. But Amazon did the same thing. They disrupted the shopping model where you can now sit at home and you can order something, and in a day, the next day, you will get it through Amazon Prime. If it's a product that's strong in demand, like underwear or socks or cell phone case or headphones, whatever, it will get to you the next day. So they disrupted that model. Now I just wanted to define disruption. So don't you think that Masonry is also ripe for disruption in many ways? I think it is in many ways. One of the ways that I disrupted something in my lodge, very simple, a very small example, and I think it's a relevant example. When I was a junior warden 3 years ago, actually, because of COVID, I was a junior warden 2018 to 2019. So I came across this really big problem that I'd have to walk around with a piece of paper asking people, hey, do you plan on coming to the regular meeting for dinner? Because I have to order the right amount of meals. The problem was that not enough people, there was no accurate way of determining how many people would attend the dinner. And so how many meals to be ordered from the caterer. And it was a big problem because what it would lead to is either underestimating or overestimating the number of meals, and either over-ordering or under-ordering the number of meals. If you under-order the number of meals, if in case a visitor shows up or whatever, that's a problem, right? If you over-order the number of meals, that cost extra money that we're wasting, and food that we're wasting, most importantly. And when I became the junior warden, I realized that the amount of money we were wasting and food we were wasting. Expensive gourmet food, by the way. We had a really good caterer that would come in, like a chef, 5-star chef. And at the end of the night, there would be this much food, and we'd be giving it away for free, basically, in portions, and people would be taking it home. And the guy was charging us $15 a meal, right? So if there's 10 extra meals, that's $150 extra that we're wasting on any given night. So I came up with this idea. I said, what if there was a way to accurately determine the number of meals? In the past, what people had done, some of the junior wardens had done, is they would walk around with a piece of paper. They would ask people, hey, you going to come to the dinner next Thursday? Yes or no? Yes? Okay, he would write the name down. But that is ridiculous. Walking around the lodge, there's 30 people in the lodge room, and you're literally walking around and taking, and what if the person that's going to come to the dinner is not there the night of, right? And he just shows up at the dinner. So even that was not accurate, in my opinion. It was wasteful and it was not accurate. So I came up with a solution where we set up an automated email system on our website. And if you had come to my lodge, I would have shown you, and I'll show this to you after our Zoom call. Where basically we created a secret page on our website. It's MississaugaLodge.com, right? And the secret page is MississaugaLodge.com/RSVP. And basically it's a page that's not listed on the website, but it exists on the website only by the link, right? And you would go to this link and you see a little form and it says name, email address, event. An event is a drop-down menu where there's 10 dates on it, for example. It's a calendar almost. You click on it. Let's say you plan on attending the regular meal. Boom, you click on it. And there's a section for notes. And it gives you the option of selecting a regular meal or a vegetarian meal. And when you click that website automatically generates an email that goes to the junior warden's mailbox. So that's just an example of disruption, and it worked really well. In my year as junior warden, what I would do is I would get the secretary to send out an email, and then the email it would say, brethren, if you wish to attend the dinner at the regular meeting, please go to this link and RSVP. If you don't RSVP and you show up, you're basically gambling with your meal, because we don't know if we'll have a meal for you. We would like to, but if you didn't RSVP, I'm sorry, right? And it works really well. It works really, really well for the whole year. And since then, we've implemented it, and every junior warden now basically uses it in our lodge. So that's just one example of disruption, and I don't know how many examples I could give you, but I think Masonry is ripe for disruption in many ways. And Zoom was, by the way, a great disruption that happened during the pandemic. That the fact that we were able to have another great example of a disruption is the electronic voting that's taking place at Grand Lodge. Excellent idea, right? So I think these are just small examples, but there are. Masonry is still very traditional, still very black and white on paper, very analog. And in order for us to adapt and be more ready for the future and the next generation, after me, I feel like an older guy now, because it's true. The next generation after me, they're even more intense when it comes to technology, and the TikTok generation, right? You know what I'm talking about. They're far more intense with their technology and their phones and all that than my generation was. So Masonry is ripe for disruption.
I agree with that 100%. I think, yes, disruption can be scary and comes from that word disturb, but sometimes it's necessary. And I definitely think it's necessary now. And those are some great examples. One thing I love about this podcast is I really hope other junior wardens tune in and hear, because I've been a junior warden many times, trying to get an accurate count is always frustrating. And that's a perfect example of a positive disruption, and something that other lodges and other junior wardens could and should learn from. And
I just want to give one more example. Go ahead, please.
No, go ahead. Next example.
I want to give one more example, and I think it's very relevant, and I hope everybody that's listening will pay attention. Basically, one of the areas that really frustrates me that is still not, still operating in a very analog way is how we do charity work. Okay. I know we talked about this last time very briefly off the air, basically. That we're still collecting charity, we're still doing it in the more traditional way, whether it's a broken column, which is nice, it's a nice gesture. I'm not talking down on the broken column by any means, whether it's the fraternal assistance cup or the tray or whatever, Or it could be something like, very traditional where the DDGM on his official visits makes an announcement. Whatever. Is still very traditional and is still ripe for disruption. One of the ways that we could disrupt charity, I think it would really lead to us collecting a lot more funds and more effectively distributing funds, is through online fundraisers. GoFundMe, for example. I used GoFundMe. I told you off the record. I don't want to reveal that this charitable situation that happened, because it defeats the purpose of doing charity work. I think charity should be silent and quiet, and that's the best way to do charity work, quietly. But there was a case where there was a great need of funds for a brother who passed away in our lodge. We did a charitable drive 3-4 years ago where we used GoFundMe, and the campaign went viral all over Ontario. People from I had never heard of, and we more than doubled or we almost tripled our goal of raising funds in 3 or 4 days. And it just tells you that people want to give, people want to do charity work, but you just have to make it easy for them. And GoFundMe, something like GoFundMe, makes that possible.
It does, and that's another GoFundMe, another great example of a positive disruption. And again, something else for lodges to consider, because you're able to, as you discussed, with the GoFundMe, you're able to fundraise beyond the boundaries of your lodge or your district. You can fundraise globally. At that point, you can share the link wherever wherever there's a Facebook group about Freemasonry, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a great. Again, I'm hoping anybody listening from a Masonic lodge takes these ideas and applies them to their own lodges. Another great place to meet Masons and learn different things that are happening and what you can apply to your own lodge. I'm going to do one more plug for this, is Grand Lodge, July 20th, July 21st. And I want to mention, because this is something I think people need to keep in mind. Ontario has put out the staycation tax credit for this year. It's basically any travel you do in the province, you can claim up to 20% of the cost on your taxes for accommodation. So if you want to stay overnight at the Royal York or in Toronto, 20% of that can be taken off at tax time, which is something to keep in mind, right? It's a little thing, but Royal York can be expensive to stay at. 20% off can't hurt anything.
You don't have to stay at the Royal York, by the way. You can easily stay at anywhere nearby, get an Airbnb. I mean, Royal York is located at a very good location, Front and York. Right around Front and York, there are a lot of hotels nearby, within a walking distance, within a 5-minute walk. You could stay at a cheaper location, or you can get an Airbnb at a condo if you're coming from another part of Ontario, and your Royal York is expensive, probably $250, $300 a night. During Grand Lodge, it'll be even more expensive because of the demand, right? Just rent an Airbnb, a condo. Right around the corner, you can rent a condo for something cheaper, with a 1 room or 2 rooms, maybe share it with another buddy, if you wish. There are a lot of ideas.
Absolutely. And even for that, for any accommodation costs, the tax credit is available, and it's what it's there for, right? And it's a great example of Freemasons doing something that is helpful to the local economy and travel and supporting Airbnb, hotels. It's all a very good thing. As was this interview. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me, both at the Southgate installation and today. I am very much looking forward to, I'm actually going to be back in the GTA soon on the 19th for an installation. I can't think of the name off the top of my head, but I'm really hoping I get a chance to also come back and visit Mississauga Temple and Mississauga Lodge, and get to sit in a meeting where you yourself are in the East, see one of your
yeah, I would like to just squeeze in a plug myself while you brought this up, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
our lodge, so we were Mississauga Lodge number 524. We meet in Port Credit, Mississauga. Basically, For those that don't live in the GTA, that's basically the QEW and Mississauga Road. Okay. We are active. We're doing a lot of great things. We're very lucky to have a long lineup of people waiting to join the lodge. We have all these excellent candidates lined up. I being the ambitious person that I am, want to break all records when it comes to doing a lot in my year and doing it well and not burning out my guys. So there's a lot of interesting things that I got going on right now. In the month of May, for example, May and June, I'll just tell you what's happening. April's a little slow, but May and June, we got a lot going on. During the first so we meet on the Thursdays, by the way, the first and second Thursday of the month. Our regular meeting is on the second Thursday. Our emergent meeting is on the first Thursday of the month. Okay. On the first Thursday of May, we are having an emergency services degree team perform a first degree at our lodge. Okay. This is a very well-known degree team. It used to be called the police degree team because all the guys running the, traditionally they were all cops, but now they've incorporated other members of the emergency services like fire and paramedics, etc. So that's a very good one. They're actually coming from Fenelon Falls. So great respect for them for coming to Mississauga Lodge and doing this degree. It'll be an initiation. On the second Thursday of June, we have what's called our Strawberry Night. It is a very, very, very special and an important night for us. It's a tradition, a long time tradition in our lodge's history, because where we are located, that entire area used to be surrounded by strawberry fields at one point. So 100 years ago, we would have a tradition where on the second Thursday, right, our last meeting before the summer recess, basically, we would have a strawberry night where a lot of other lodges would visit us. A lot of brethren from around the district would visit us, and we would serve them strawberry-inspired dessert. Okay. So on the second Thursday of June, our strawberry night, we'll be doing a second degree. We'll be having dinner before the lodge. It'll be a nice meal for us to break bread. But after the dinner, after the lodge meeting, the second degree is done, we will meet downstairs and we're going to have strawberries and ice cream. And that's something we've done a long time. And it's a great night to meet visitors from within the district, from outside the district. It is a night where we encourage visitation and we invite as many people to come out as possible. So I would invite you, Worship Brother Adamson, if you're available that night, please come to Mississauga Lodge. I know it's a bit of a drive for you, but you're welcome. And any of your audience members that want to attend, feel free to, you're invited. You're my guest on that evening.
Thank you so much. And you guys, I know Mississauga Lodge has a website. I'll leave that in the description below. Are those events listed on the website as well?
No, they're not. Our website is actually being overhauled as we speak. It's expected to be, a new website is expected to be live within the next 2 or 3 weeks. So it's not on the website, but it will be on the new website, but it is not on the current website.
All right, well, then in that case, everybody keep it in mind. Who doesn't love, the emergency services degree would be amazing. And who doesn't love strawberries and ice cream, right? Especially before summer. Or at the start of summer. So keep those both in mind. Worshipful Sir, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast. And, for all of the work that you're doing, we talked about it in Toronto here, for all the work you're doing for Freemasonry, finding positive ways to disrupt the craft and help it grow. It is much appreciated. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and I wish you all the best, and I hope to see you soon.